Hi guys, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with another Books Beside My Bed video. For anyone who's new here, this is a video where I recap my week's reading every single week, so you sort of get a glimpse into how I'm attempting to smash through my TBR. This week I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of books because I'm on school holidays. So I am a teacher. I have had a whole week off and I basically had nothing planned during this week except for one day in a classroom and half a day out with my mum. So I had a lot of time to read, and that's what I prioritized around doing little jobs around the house. So please don't freak out by the number of books that I read, because I prioritized reading and I have pretty much sat on the couch for the last 3 days reading. This is my reading week from the 23rd to the 29th of September. This week I read 10 books. I read a total of 3,520 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 197 books for the whole year. A lot of these books this week are review copy books because it was a release week for a lot of things here in Australia, so bear that in mind as well. I will also mention, because I have 10 books and I don't want this video to be super long, I have got reviews for most of these books up on my blog already, so I will let you know which ones have reviews on my blog and I will link to them down below. The first book that I read this week is Mirage by Samaya Dowd. This was published this year by Hodder and Stoughton, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was also the YA Room's book pick for September, which is why I read it. It is a young adult science fiction story, and it is about Amani, who is a villager, and close to her 18th birthday, Amani is kidnapped by the local ruling class to be the body double of the princess because she is uncannily similar in appearance. The ruling class is currently headed by a king who was part of an invading force. I really like this story. There's lots of adventure. Amani is learning to go from being someone who just lived in the village to someone who has to learn the inner workings of the court to pass as the princess. She has to get to know a lot of people. She spends a lot of time with the princess's fiance, who she grows quite close with, and yeah, it's a little bit insta-lovey, but also at the same time it sort of feels natural because there is a commonality that the two of them have. Also, the book is not super long, so there's not a lot of time to develop it anyway, and it is the first book in a series. Also, Idris is super cute. He's the fiance. He was really adorable. So 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm actually very much looking forward to continuing the series. If you want more of my thoughts, I do have a review of this on my blog. Then I read Tales from the Inner City by Shaun Tan. You guys have heard me talk about this a lot. This is a 2018 release from Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is a collection of short stories and a couple of verse stories as well. This is really an exploration of how humans and animals interact, especially in urban settings, and the impact that humans have on animal life, and also a little bit vice versa. It is very surreal. It almost feels a bit magical realism, but it's not quite. And it's full of his gorgeous illustrations. My favorite story in here has to be the story of the bears with lawyers, and that's really on looking at animal rights. I really love that particular story, but all of the stories were really enjoyable as well. Shaun Tan is a must read if you are looking at Australian children's literature, although I wouldn't recommend this for younger readers because I don't think they get it unless you spend a lot of time unpacking it with them. Older children and adults will get so much out of this book. I have a review for this on my blog for those who are interested. Thank you to Allen Unwin for sending me a review copy. I loved this so much. Impostors by Scott Westerfeld. This was published in September 2018 by Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This was a review copy sent to me from Allen and Unwin, so thank you very much to them. This takes place in Scott Westerfeld's Uglies world, which I have not read, and I can say, having not read the series, you can read this as a standalone book, although I have a feeling there's a few things that I missed, but nothing that significantly impacted on this particular story. So this is set after the Ugly series, and it focuses on Frey, who is the youngest of a set of twin sisters who are born to the leader of Shreve. And Frey has spent her entire life being trained to be the body double and protector of her older sister, Raffia. And as such, no one really knows that she exists. When her father has a joint business venture with a local town, Frey is sent as collateral because that town has requested Raffia as the collateral against her father going against their agreement, and so they send Frey in her sister's place, and there she begins to almost unravel the story of what her father has done to this world and the reasons why the way he does things are wrong, and so she gets caught up in this sort of rebellion. It was really interesting to read, and I'm glad I read it. It has a whole lot of elements that I really like. It's fast paced, there's a lot of action, and there is very snappy dialogue. It was very fast and quick and easy to read. I have a review for this one on my blog as well. Then I read Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha... Oh, I'm going to pronounce that wrong. I'll leave the book's cover up on the screen. This was a review copy from NetGalley. It is being published in November by Hodder and Stoughton, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is a YA dark fantasy series. Main character Lay lives in a world where there are 3 castes of people. So there are the humans who are the paper caste. You have the half human, half animal / demon caste, which I've forgotten off the top of my head what that caste was called. I think, oh no, the steel caste. And then you have the highest ranking caste in this world, which is the moon caste. And those are humanoid animals. So they're essentially, they look like humans, they walk upright, but they have complete animal features. And they look down on everyone else, particularly the paper caste. And one day she is kidnapped to become a member of the Paper Girls, who are a group of 8 young women who are selected by the king, who is a moon caste, and in this case he is a bull form demon. They're basically there to serve and pleasure him. So it's very, very dark, and it deals with things like kidnapping and rape and abuse and violence towards women. So there's a lot of that going in, so be warned of that going into it. It also features a female-female romance, but it also has a main cast of predominantly female characters. So there's a lot of interaction between all of the girls and young women in the story, and a lot of it is complicated. And yes, there's some infighting between the Paper Girls, but at the same time there's a lot of understanding between them as well, with the events and the situations they find themselves in, which I thought was really, really well done. It was a much darker read than I was expecting going into it. I actually really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought it was very sensitive to the topics that were going on. And I do have a review for it on my blog, so I'll leave a link to that down below. This is probably a book that I'll go out and buy, even though I've already read it, because I really enjoyed it that much. Then I read Moonrise by Sarah Crossan. This was published in 2017 by Bloomsbury, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a novel told in verse, so the whole thing is told in verse. And it is the story of Joe, whose older brother is on death row, and he hasn't seen his older brother in many, many years. Now that his brother has a due date for the execution, he decides that he's going to try and spend the last few weeks with his brother and trying to understand what happened to put his brother in this situation. This book is heartbreaking and thought-provoking and just beautifully written. It really does make you think about the systems that we have in place. If you're in for a read that's going to pull on your heartstrings and, you know, really evoke an emotional response, definitely check out Moonrise. Then I read What the Woods Keep by Katja de Paceta. This is a 2018 release from Allen and Unwin. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is a review copy, so thank you to the publishers for sending it to me. I really, really enjoyed this story. It is a dark YA story that starts out as a mystery thriller, and you sort of don't know where this story is going to go, and it goes into a different genre, which I love, but you don't know for the longest time whether it's going to go there or not. So I'm not going to say what it is, unless you want to read my review on my blog, and then you can find out. But this is the story of Hayden, who on her 18th birthday inherits her family's manor in a town that she left many, many years ago after the disappearance of her mother. She is estranged from her father and currently living with a roommate named Dell, who has become her best friend. After inheriting the family home, she decides to go and visit the house one last time to decide whether or not she's going to keep it or sell it. And so Dell comes with her in essentially a road trip out to Colorado to try and uncover a little bit of a mystery, because her mother left the house to her along with a set of instructions, and Hayden's never been able to really resist trying to find out what happened to her mother. And once they get to the house, very strange things begin happening, and it keeps you turning the pages the whole time. It is really, really wonderful, deeply atmospheric. Can't recommend it enough if you like sort of thrillers or with a question about the supernatural in it. Oh man, this video is going to be long. I apologize. Then I read Better Not Pout by Annabeth Albert. This is a 2018 release by Carina Press, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I got this for review off NetGalley, Annabeth Elbert writes the Off-Base series that I really like. This was a very cute, contemporary, fluffy romance set during Christmas time, which is not my usual thing because I like Christmas as a holiday, but it's not my big holiday at all. So I only really requested this because it was Annabeth Elbert, and I thought I better read something else of hers and just see if it was one particular series I liked or if it's all of her books. It is the story of Nick, who is a sergeant major in the military police, and he is about to retire, but he has been asked to take on the role of playing the local Santa for a charity group in the town closest to his base. And there he meets Teddy, who runs the charity organization and also dresses up as the elf, and they're off. Their first meeting is them off taking photos around the town for a Guess Where Santa Is photo competition, and it's highly adorable. Nick is in his mid-40s and he's retiring, not because he wants to, but because he's basically being forced to, and he's sort of jaded by that. He really loves his job, so he's got plans to retire out in Florida. And then he meets Teddy, who is this very optimistic guy in his late 20s who's really happy-go-lucky. He's got a really lovely extended family who welcome Nick into the town. When Nick crashes his car in the middle of a snowstorm, he is forced to take up the hospitality of Teddy, and, you know, then the romance goes from there. And it's really about how they negotiate the fact that they really like one another and they like spending time with one another, but Nick is leaving in a month, so there's a deadline. Then I read Magic Bites by Ilona Andrews, which is totally Kirsty's fault. I'm blaming you, Kirsty. And it was published in 2007 by Gallant, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is the first book in the Kate Daniels series, which is an urban fantasy series. Follows Kate Daniels, who is a mercenary who deals with magical issues. She lives in a world where magic exists, but it sort of ebbs and flows, and whenever the magic is high, people go out of their way to basically cause trouble. And so she often gets called in to help deal with it. And in the first book, her guardian has been killed, and so she finds herself determined to find out what happened to him, and then gets caught in the politics between a group of necromancers and a pack of shapeshifters and the group that normally tries to keep the peace between the two of them. And it was just a hell of a lot of fun. There was a lot of action. It was quite gory. Kate is very sassy. She's completely out of her league in this story, and she knows it and she doesn't care, which I really appreciate, and I'll be continuing the series. So thank you, Kirsty. Then I read Widows by Linda LaPlante. This was sent to me earlier in the year for review by Alan Unwin. It is a 2018 release from Bonnier, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It is a British crime story. While I appreciate the story itself, it is very well told and very well written. It just wasn't for me. I found the pacing to be super, super slow. It is about Dolly Rawlins, who is the wife of a pretty well-connected gang boss. Harry had organised a robbery, and he had a crew of 4 people. And then on the day, something goes wrong, and Harry and 2 of the other men in his crew are killed. Dolly then uncovers his ledger, which has all of the plans to commit the robbery. She recruits the widows of the other men to try and complete this robbery, and then they realise that they actually need a 4th man, and then it's sort of a story about who was the 4th man. I don't know, it was a little bit strange. I mean, I love the cover. The cover is, you know, cover goals. I just found it really, really slow, and I wanted something to happen more. But if you like your British crime novels, this is fantastic because this is how they're all written. I just don't think the pacing in them is for me. So 3 out of 5 stars. I will have a review on my blog going up in the next couple of days for this one too. And then my last book, and this one, I'm really annoyed with myself that I've spent so long talking about the other books because this one I wanted to talk about a little bit more. I finally read, from a certain point of view, the Star Wars anthology celebrating 40 years of Star Wars, and this has a whole bunch of different authors. I have tabbed this all to hell, but I also annotated in this time. So I've underlined and I've written things in the margins, and I'm not finished. I actually want to go back and add more to it because I was listening to the audio for this on Scribd. What I will say is that the audio for this is fantastic because all of the short stories have different narrators. Some of them have multiple narrators, some of them have sound effects, some of them are entirely cinematic, and that was really awesome. But this was published in 2017 by Century, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I wanted to give it 5, but there's a few stories in there that I just really didn't like, so on balance it's probably a 4.5. This is basically a collection of short stories of various kinds about minor characters from the first film, so from A New Hope, and how they see events happen. So the very first stories start from the start of the film, where Darth Vader is basically capturing the Tantive 4, and we go from there. So everything's in chronological order. It doesn't jump around. So you literally move through the progression of the first film from different characters. And then we spend a lot of time either on the Tantive 4 or on the Death Star or on Tatooine, particularly in the Cantina, and also then later on in the Trench Run. I thought I would just highlight some of my favourite stories because there were a few. The first one was Ramus, which was written by Gary Whitta, and I'm having to look at my notes, so I apologise. And this was a story about Captain Antilles from the Tantive 4, so the captain that Darth Vader basically kills in at the start of the film, and it's his version of events leading up to when Darth Vader boards the ship. And then the next story along by Christy Golden is called The Bucket, and it's the point of view of a stormtrooper who is on the Tantive 4 and who is the one who actually knocks Princess Leia unconscious, and his thoughts on everything that's going on. The next one was The Sith of Data Work by Ken Liu. This one was hilarious. It is about an officer who knows her stuff on a Star Destroyer. She's basically trying to help out another officer who didn't shoot down the pod with R2-D2 and C-3PO, and he needs to know how to do it so that he doesn't basically get court-martialed and executed. And so she gives him all of these steps and all the data forms that he needs to fill out, and it is hilarious because this woman is devious and she basically knows that she can get away with anything because she knows these forms inside and out, and it was great. Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, which is a story where the Force version of Qui-Gon visits Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert, and it's their discussion about how well the two of them have looked after Luke Skywalker and the Skywalker legacy. Born in the Storm by Danielle Jose Older is another stormtrooper story. This time it's a stormtrooper who is on Tatooine. It is a report that this soldier is making. Audio for this is hilarious. This one I highly recommend listening to the audio for, because it's basically the report of searching for the droids, and the commentary that this stormtrooper has is hilarious. I was just laughing out loud the whole time because he just wants to go and have a drink, and then he just wants to go and ride a bantha, and it was one of those stories where you just think, oh, this is so ridiculous, but it's great. Later by Will Wheaton is the story of a rebel father who is writing to his 2-year-old daughter on the eve of the Death Star attack. There is another by Gary D. Schmidt, was a Yoda story, and it is Obi-Wan Kenobi asking Yoda to train Luke Skywalker. Palpatine by Ian Dozier is a verse story, and it is sort of Palpatine's version of events, which was really cool. Judy Roster by Jason Frey is a bit of a take on the fake wedge trope about the trench run, and it's talking about the character who always gets mistaken for Wedge Antilles, and I love Wedge Antilles, so this story was right up my alley. Desert Sun by Pierce Brown was also a really good one. This time it's the trench run from Biggs Darklighter's perspective, and Biggs is Luke's friend from Tatooine, and that one's kind of heartbreaking. And then the last one that I really liked was Grounded by Greg Rucker, and this is from the perspective of the chief of the ground crew during the trench run. So Nera Case is the one who basically fixes up all of the machines, gets them all in the air. She knows all of the pilots, she knows all of their ships, and it's her story as everything's happening. So she gives you facts about the pilots and also is sort of tallying up the reasons for their deaths, whether it's being shot out by a TIE fighter or mechanical failure. She sort of goes through all of it, and it's her personal reaction to that, which was really interesting. So those are the things that I read this week. If you stuck around to the end of this video, thank you so much. I'm sorry that this video was so long this week. It may not be as long next week. I don't know. I've still got another week of holidays. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or what you have been reading this week. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys.